So Basil sent along his 2 bits worth, and we want to reiterate what we talked about last night about the Connecticut libraries, where up until the new budget, you could either go to your library and get a book, or you could go to your library.
Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you. Kitty says...
Yeah, I am. I'm doing it right now. Can I get back to my show? I know I know there were 4 birds. They made it into the final 4 for the men's and women's. 4 birds, 3 dogs, and lung cancer. I understand that. But you don't have to crow about it just because you picked the Yukon Lady Huskies to lose. Get over it. You picked it. Okay, fine. We'll talk more about this when I get home. Okay. So Basil tossed me a quarter, and that just went that away. But that's what it would cost. That's what the average Connecticut citizen pays for this program in Connecticut libraries, to have the ability to go to your library, and if they don't have the book or the video or any kind of media stuff there, they will send to another library that has it. They've got it on the computerized system to scout out where it is and have it sent to your library so you can get it. Or if you choose, you can go to another library in your area and pick up that has that particular reference item and pick it up. So will have had that for many, many, many years, and now pretty soon it's gone for a 25 cent per Connecticut citizen savings. So I'm not blaming Governor Malloy for that, because it's not his plan. It's the other party trying to save a nickel on the backs of regular folks that actually use the library and don't have home libraries with everything under the sun in them. So we were talking about last night. We were talking about Henry's visit to Germany, to the Czech Republic, and ultimately to Poland, where he grew up. But we're talking off camera between shows, and I was noting that when Kristen and I went on one of our honeymoon tours, on the way back we came through western Texas, through a little town called La Mesa. And on both sides of the roads were literally thousands of wind turbines. And we had to stop the car, we had to get out, we had to record the sound of these thousands of wind turbines in Texas, the incredibly loud noise that they made, which went something like this. You couldn't hear me? That's good, because we could barely hear these wind turbines in the thousands. So back to, what was the countryside like in the 3 separate countries that you went to, Germany, Czech Republic, and Poland? Well, what do you see as you're driving, as you're in the train?
Well, that's the fascinating part. Most of Germany was pretty flat where I went. We went from Dusseldorf, from more or less Dusseldorf to Berlin. And by the way, the train station in Berlin is awesome. It's the best station I've ever seen. Although the one in Krakow is also outstanding, because right next to it is not only a really great train station, but also a huge mall. Think of our mall in Danbury, and maybe like 5 times bigger. And you'd think that Poland is a backwards country, but if you went there, not only do you have shopping, you have trains, but right next door you have trolleys and public transport. So there's really no need to take taxi, because you can get anywhere with public transport.
So Krakow is what we think of as Krakow in Poland. Okay,
yeah.
Heard of Krakow.
Actually, it's a smaller version of Prague. Mm-hmm. Okay, both cities were not destroyed in any way, or if there was any destruction, it was minor during World War II. So they got spared.
Yeah, I guess the Allies principally went after Germany, which is the instigator of the Second World War.
Yeah, so the land being flat lends itself very well towards implementing wind power, because there's not a lot of obstructions in the space. Once we left Berlin, went through Dresden. I didn't stop the first time, and went towards Prague. Then we hit some, the train turned from German to Czech. I didn't change, but the announcements all of a sudden started being in Czech. And we were actually traveling along a river, and the river, had like sand banks and so on, but nothing taller than 1,000 feet. So, but most of the solar power I saw was electricity. It didn't seem like hot water was that popular, although in my view, solar hot water is a much better investment and a much faster return for your money.
Yeah, and here in America, I think it generally is about a quarter of our electric bill. About half of it is heating and cooling, and about a quarter of it is hot water.
Yeah. Well, you need to heat hot water. It makes sense to use solar.
Sure.
I mean, ultimately, once you get past the initial investment and you pay that off, then hot water is pretty much free if you use solar power. And as I said, the investment, I've actually installed a system with a friend of mine, and we agree that it's about a 3-year return on your investment.
After 3 years, it's paid for.
It's paid for, and then
pretty much free except for minor maintenance.
Yeah, the system lasts about 25 years at least, and most of the components, all the components, are replaceable, so it can go on forever. Electricity, is like, solar hot water is about 80% efficient. Electricity, solar electricity, is about, let's say, 15%, more or less, plus or minus a few points.
Yeah.
Efficient. So electricity is more expensive. Solar electricity is more expensive, but also the return on investment is longer.
Yeah, certainly not. Certainly a little longer than 3 years, but.
And we saw a lot of that in Germany, and a little less in Prague, and we did see some in Poland, but mostly hot water and wind. Didn't see a lot of PV though, and I did see, as we were zooming past on the train, did see a number of solar farms and some large wind installations as we near the railroad.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's important to note that in America, we're making a lot of progress. As a matter of fact, California, the state of California, just passed that 50% mark, where a little more than 50% of their total energy needs are met by solar and by wind. So
I'd be surprised if it's that high a number.
It just passed. It was about a month ago. They passed that
Really?
that 50% barrier. It was a big hoop to do in the news about that. That they've made that far.
Maybe what they're saying is maybe for 50% of the new energy installations are solar, okay? But that doesn't mean that the total amount of energy supplied by clean power is 50% for the state.
Well, that's for you guys to figure out. We're putting that's your homework assignment. You got to find out for us which of those two measurements apply to California, and more importantly, what percentage at this point of Connecticut's power is supplied by solar and by wind turbines? Because not much, but we certainly have
in
the
Connecticut, not wind. There's only very, very few land installations. Most of it is coming online now offshore. On the PV, there's a lot of solar electricity being implemented. I actually helped a friend just in February install a system on his house, a 10,000 watt system. So we're now watching it to see what the production is, and it's about 60% of his use is offset by solar.
Nice.
Solar electricity.
So that's any idea about how long it'll take to get into the free energy phase of it?
Probably about 10 years or so.
Nice.
Between, as I said, 7 to 10 years.
Now that's a big deal, and I just had an opportunity to interview with a reporter for a local media outlet the other day about Connecticut and homes, because there's been a lot of stories planted in the media, mostly the alternative media, how don't put solar panels on your home if you plan to sell it, because what buyer's going to want solar panels? I mean, who would want that? Who would want to have that kind of energy savings? What would they think, they're crazy? Well, yeah, they like it. They like it, and rather than the notion being planted that it's something that people don't want, buyers don't want, it's something that buyers very much want. And if they don't have it, they're doing it themselves. It's coming, and it's coming on very quickly, and sooner than you can imagine. You drive around and take a look around, you'll see a lot of solar panels on homes that weren't there a year ago.
Well, clean power in Connecticut is coming online despite the naysayers. And there's some things in place that help it. There are, the utilities subsidize the installations because of the fact that we pay extra in order to get clean power and encourage clean power. That is not a state-funded program. It is a utility-funded or ratepayer-funded program. And a while back, the governor wanted to take that money into the general budget, and people objected because it's not the state. It's not state's money.
The general fund.
Also, as a realtor, you should know that it is a law that any incremental value added to the house because of clean energy, that is not factored into the tax base. So if your house is, worth, let's say, $200,000, and then you add a $20,000 system on your house,
right?
Okay, the rate is paid at, the tax is on $200,000.
So you don't have your property tax assessment increased by that added value.
Correct. Yeah, and it's by
because it's not
law.
A permanent structure.
Yeah.
Okay, that
and
makes sense.
if you're leasing, then you have an option to remove it at the end of the lease, which is usually 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but getting back to Prague. In Prague, what we saw was mostly, the Charles Bridge, where I got into looking at the buskers, and buskers are street players. So on the way out, as we were going out, we saw 3 busking locations, and they were playing. The first one was playing American jazz, of course, and the next one was Australian. He was playing the jiggeroo. Is it jiggeroo? That's this big tube that.
Oh, the long, like an Alphorn?
Yeah, he was doing that. And on the way back, we had some others. But interestingly, as we went into the old town, this is the day after we actually had a tour, and a tour of the Jewish ghetto that was right in the middle of Prague. And that was, we've seen graves in there that were marked like 1300 something. So, most of the buildings in Prague are older than any building here in the States.
Now, when you say ghetto, you don't mean ghetto in the sense of a slum, but the sense of a collective area, like for instance in Danbury, Town Hill Avenue, where when the Portuguese came here in the 1950s, they settled in that neighborhood.
It's more than that, David, because in most European countries, Jews were not allowed to own land, so they resorted to trade, and then they had their own town or cities within cities. The ghetto was walled. In the case of Prague, it was walled, and access was controlled in and out. There were guards allowing access in or out, and they also, within the ghetto, had cemeteries. Had a cemetery and their, and synagogues and so on.
Specifically to Jews.
Yep.
Has that changed?
Well, now it's open, but the walls are still there, obviously without guards and so on. But it's still there
as a reminder of the past.
Yeah. And there was a ghetto also in Krakow. And we took a tour of it. It didn't seem like it was walled off, but there was we were told that in Prague there are under less than 1,000 Jews living or practicing
city?
In the entire country.
In the entire country?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And the same thing is true for Poland. Poland is very homogeneous, 95% plus Catholic. I think the Czechs are a little bit more diverse, but not much more.
When I was there, it seemed to be fairly homogeneous, fairly, for lack of a better word, WASP. Well, except for the Catholics, but fairly almost exclusively white.
Yeah.
Interesting side note that I went there with Diane, and her family took us on a drive through the countryside in I think this is the Czech Republic rather than Slovakia. Yeah. But we drive past areas and they'd say, "It's those gypsies."
Yeah.
those gypsies, they come into a town and they get free stuff, and they don't work, they get free housing, it was basically the way that racist whites in America used the N-word pretty freely.
Yeah.
But of course, the gypsies were, in fact, were they first or second that Hitler went after? Was it the homosexuals first and the gypsies second?
I don't know.
It was one or the other, but the gypsies were right in there in the concentration camps along with Jews.
Yep, and there were about 12 million people who died in concentration camps, not just 6 million Jews. I mean, any loss of life is deplorable, but let's be fair and mention the other people who suffered as well.
Homosexuals and the gays and other people.
I remember gypsies when I was a little kid in Poland, living on the farm, and when the caravans went through, we were standing on the roadside throwing rocks at them, because the idea was that obviously it was wrong. I know it's wrong, was at the time, but the thinking was that as we were paying attention to them, they were behind, walking around behind us and stealing our chickens. But now there are laws in Europe that prevent them from migrating. Okay, they're prohibited from migrating like they used to. So they, there are locations in Poland where there are, I guess, centers of gypsy.
So kind of like
for gypsies,
like forced internment, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. They're not allowed to migrate like they used to.
Like commuters, like American
good or
commuters?
bad, good or
like
bad.
American relocation families.
Yeah. Now,
migrate.
For those who are listening here, Prague is an enchanted city. I would highly recommend going. Even taking a walking tour around the Charles Bridge and going into the palaces and so on. It's an enchanted city, as is Krakow.
Yeah, I found it to be very nice.
And by the way, like Dresden, Warsaw or Warszawa, was also destroyed. It was destroyed in 1939. When the Poles resisted, Warsaw didn't fall till about 30 days later, after the invasion on September 1 in 39, and that was pretty much razed, not in 39, but also later on when they went after the Jews in the ghettos, and then ultimately as the Soviets were coming in, the Germans also were also destroying the city. So the old town there was also destroyed, and it was rebuilt. So if you go and walk through the old town now, you won't see any signs of destruction.
So they destroyed it on the way in, they destroyed it on the way out?
Yeah.
The Nazis did?
Yeah, and it was rebuilt brick by brick. In the case of Dresden, in some cases, like in that cathedral I mentioned, they actually tried to put the old bricks in the right spots. Okay, and I'm told by the architect that about 30% of the stones in that cathedral are original stones.
Nice.
Yeah. So Prague, then I went back to Dortmund, which is another 8-hour ride on a train, and then I went back. My mom was visiting with relatives, and then we went to Warsaw by plane.
That's amazing to think about traveling almost 1,000 miles in 8 hours. That's just amazing.
Well, I wouldn't say it was 1,000 because they do have stops.
Oh, okay, so it's a local rather than an express?
And in some cases, if it's a main stop, then they wait at least 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's not like, on and off and go. It, in some cases, like in Berlin, for instance, it would be an extended stay.
People a little leeway as far as if you're running a couple minutes late to get to the station.
They'll
give you a little bit of time.
If you're late and you're not there on time, the train goes. Okay.
But at least they give you 5 minutes to be that tolerance of being a couple minutes late at least. From the time the train arrives in the station. So
I spent some time in Warsaw with my mother. We visited the old town for 2 days and went by train to Krakow. And that's about a 2.5-hour ride by the trains that were in place. Ours took 4 hours because of the route they took. They went more or less southwest, then they came back up and then went to Krakow. I don't know why, but it's apparently there's a route. 2 trains that go that way, and we happened to take the one that we didn't realize.
So you got to see a little extra of the countryside.
Yeah, in Krakow, I went to visit family from Krakow. We spent a day there and we visited the old town. And then from the old town we went to Katowice, and Katowice is like the main town. There's about at least 10 towns with a population of about 200,000 plus people in each one. And most of them are interconnected by trolley except for one. Okay, one town decided to eliminate it for whatever reason. That area was very industrial. When I traveled there 40 years ago, the air was pink. And now most of the steel factories and the coal mines have been redeployed
When you say pink,
for the
what do you mean
things.
by that?
So polluted that, you know,
That
it's...
the air is just,
Yeah.
oh, the air was pink?
Yeah, the air was pink. Like, you know, in Rome, if
Yeah.
you go to Rome, the air is blue.
That's a,
And the
Last time
reason
I
it's
was there,
blue
Rome
is
was a
because they
filthy
use
city.
two-cycle engines, those scooters.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, they contribute to that. But in Poland, because of all the steel and the
Oh,
burning...
pink, like steel is red, the iron is red, yeah.
Well, it's steel and also, you know, the burning of coal. Most of the coal factories have been, or coal mines have been redeployed, have been shut down, and now they're museums. Many of them are museums. The biggest museum I guess, not the biggest coal mine in the world, was one we saw in Dortmund. And now that's also like a world, what do they call it, world sites, world, you know, like some places in the world are designed by the United Nations as like heritage.
Oh, designated heritage zone,
Yeah,
like?
yeah.
Okay.
So that one was.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the cities that you saw were just amazing.
Yeah.
And then obviously
for
quite
the-
a lot of them. You mentioned how many cities were over 200,000 population, so they're fairly good-sized cities.
The place
What-
I was
what about in
born,
between?
the place I was born in is Bytom, B-Y-T-O-M, and there we visited the graves of our relatives, but a lot of the stuff there, buildings and so on, have collapsed because they didn't do a good job of reinforcing the tunnels they dug under the cities. So a lot of that stuff collapsed, or you'll either see, you know, abandoned buildings, or you'll see ponds of water.
Like sinkholes, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And then as the last part was a visit by a 2-hour train ride to where I lived, which is north of Katowice, which is like halfway between Silesia and Warsaw. And that was a village.
It's a village, okay, rather than a
it's
town. Would it be a village like, sort of like Brookfield or
Oh,
smaller?
no. The villages are different. They're not clustered. They're like, you have one street, and then off it you have perpendicular streets.
Okay.
So you have, my village is a perpendicular street to the main road, and then like 2 miles over is another village, samely organized, and one back is the same way. And then in between you have land, and it's flat land, and on the east side you have forest.
Oh, so there is some forest. I know you mentioned that
Pine
there's
trees,
not,
yeah.
not a lot of woods left in Europe.
There's woods, yeah. It's all, you know, it's all humanly harvested, and so this forest that I know of is due to be harvested. So, you know, they'll put in new growth, and then we went to. When I was a little kid, I used to take our cows, 3 cows, to a place where we had
Cows?
where we grew
Oh.
hay.
Yeah.
And that place is now, and to me, was a lot more backwards in some, because what they're now doing is they're using it, yes, for hay fields, but also they're using it as hunting grounds. Yeah, they have a lot of wild boar that turn the earth over, and you know, that area is pretty much secluded. But it's at least I'd say a 3-mile trek from the farm to the hay fields.
That's how far you would travel, twice a day?
Yeah, well, once a day, but it's 6 miles. You know, cows are great animals. Oh my God, they're wonderful animals. So I have 3 cows in one hand and a book in the other. And yeah.
I guess nowadays they probably have 3 cows in one hand and a laptop in the other.
Well, going back, you know, going back
PDA,
to those times 50 years ago, I remember when we put in electricity in 1960, when we ended up, those lines are still there.
Did you have telephones back then?
Only in my father's office, which was in a different village.
So the residences really didn't have phone
yeah.
service.
By the way, the village where I lived, the area was started in 1403. Yeah, and my town was in the town where I was born was in the 1300s.
We're going to have you back to hear more about this, because I know you've just arrived back and you're still digesting everything. But this is 2 minutes. Ah, you gave me the back. Okay. Well, tell us more about your town. Bitton?
Yeah, Bitton.
Bitton,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It's a coal mining town, and most of it has kind of collapsed. Although, you know, I went back to places where I used to cruise. I went to the old church. I went back to the main road I used to go up and down. My aunt worked in a dairy store, and the trolley that used to go there is still there. It's an antique trolley. It's still there, and I took a picture of it. And it just goes back and forth. It's got a trek of about 2 miles, and it goes back and forth.
Now you've been
every day.
You left Poland how many years ago?
65 and 65.
Wow. Back in the day where the Soviet Union ruled supreme.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have any trouble getting out from there? Was it a big deal to leave Poland back then?
For us, it was not, because we, my dad had a guaranteed job here. My uncle sponsored him.
Ah, okay, okay. So there was that fairly smooth transition.
Yeah. But he had to apply a few times. They were used to living in other places. My parents spent World War II in France. Mm-hmm. My mom spent her early years near a place called Lille.
Lille, okay, in France, yep.
Which is close to the Belgian border. Mm-hmm. And my dad was near Metz, which is very, in a way, close to Dusseldorf/Dortmund.
Okay, let's go through that again. We're going to have you back in the future. We know you're just back, and are still digesting that marvelous journey through those 3 countries. We'll have you back again to talk more about it, and of course you'll be back as maybe my replacement part for a couple of weeks while Kristen and I are on our next honeymoon tour. But thanks for watching Progressive Soup. David Stevenson, Henry Pietras, and thank you for joining us. See you next Wednesday night, 9:30.